The principal's voice echoed through the auditorium, calling name after name. I sat rigid in my seat, watching Emma's shoulders tense with each announcement. Students filed across the stage in burgundy caps and gowns, collecting certificates for the honors program she had worked toward for 4 years. Her name never came. The applause swallowed my shock as I watched Michael in the front row, the familiar smug expression painted across his face. My hands clenched until my nails cut into my palms. The injustice was immediate and sharp. Emma had maintained a 4.2 GPA, volunteered at 3 community programs, and led the debate team to state finals. Yet, here we sat, invisible. The audience saw a celebration. I saw calculated cruelty. Michael had always been competitive, but this crossed every line. When the ceremony ended and families rushed forward with flowers and congratulations, Emma stood frozen beside me. Her eyes were red, but she refused to let the tears fall in public. That's when I knew. This wasn't just about a missed announcement. This was about making my daughter feel worthless in front of everyone who mattered. My brother had declared war on a 16-year-old girl. He had no idea what he had just started. In the parking lot, Emma finally broke. Her shoulders shook as she whispered against my shoulder, "Mom, why would Uncle Michael do this?" I felt something cold settle in my chest. Anger would have been easier. Instead, I felt the calculated calm that had got me through law school while raising a child alone. I swallowed the scream building in my throat. Disbelief, rage, and helplessness fought for control, but I couldn't afford any of them. Not yet. I had to be smarter than this moment. Emma needed strategy, not emotion. "We're going home," I said quietly, guiding her toward the car. She looked at me with confusion, probably expecting me to storm back inside and confront Michael. But that's not how you win against people like him. He wanted a scene. He expected tears and accusations he could dismiss as overreaction. I wouldn't give him that satisfaction. Retaliation would come, but it would be precise and calculated, not impulsive. As I started the engine, I glanced at Emma's reflection in the rearview mirror. Her face was pale, eyes distant. Something fundamental had shifted in her today. She had learned that family could be cruel. That success didn't always protect you from pettiness. That being good wasn't always enough. My name is Lauren Whitman. I'm a mother first, a corporate strategist second, and a survivor of family dynamics I thought I understood until today. I had watched Michael operate for 38 years. We grew up in the same house, shared the same parents, attended the same schools. I knew how he measured worth through control and dominance. Emma threatened that. She was smarter than his children, more driven, more authentic. She didn't need to announce her achievements or diminish others to feel powerful. That made her dangerous to him. As we drove home in silence, I made Emma a promise in my mind. We would rise from this. When we did, Michael would regret underestimating us. Not because I would seek revenge, but because I would ensure Emma's success became so undeniable that his petty exclusion would look exactly like what it was. A desperate man trying to control a narrative he had already lost. I had spent 15 years building corporate partnerships and navigating office politics. I knew how to identify weaknesses, exploit opportunities, and build alliances. Michael thought this was about a graduation ceremony. He had no idea this was about legacy. And legacy was something I knew how to build. Michael's manipulations hadn't started today. They had been building for years, subtle and insidious. When Emma was 12, she wasn't invited to his son's birthday party despite being the same age. When she made the honor roll, he changed the subject at family dinners. When she won the regional science fair, he mentioned how his daughter had won a participation trophy in soccer with more enthusiasm. Each incident was small enough to dismiss as oversight or coincidence. Together, they formed a pattern Emma had noticed but couldn't articulate. She just knew Uncle Michael didn't like her. I had told myself I was imagining things, that Michael was just self-absorbed, not actively hostile. Today proved I had been naive. The honors program exclusion wasn't accidental. Michael sat on the school board. He had influence over which students received recognition. Emma's teachers had submitted her name weeks ago. I had seen the confirmation email. Somewhere between submission and ceremony, her name had been removed. Michael had made sure of that. He had taken something she earned and erased it publicly. That required planning, authority, and malice. It was invisible to everyone else, but Emma had felt every slight. And today he made his cruelty public. That night, Emma cried quietly in her room. I heard the muffled sobs through her closed door and wanted to break something. Instead, I made tea and knocked gently. She let me in without a word. We sat on her bed surrounded by acceptance letters from summer programs, debate trophies, and academic certificates that apparently meant nothing when family politics were involved. I worked so hard, she whispered, staring at her hands. I know, sweetheart. Why does he hate me? The question broke my heart because I didn't have a good answer. Because you're talented. Because you remind him of his own inadequacies. Because controlling others makes him feel powerful. None of those reasons would make sense to a 16-year-old who just wanted to belong. He doesn't hate you, I said carefully. He's threatened by you. There's a difference. She looked at me with red, swollen eyes. What do we do? I took her trembling hands in mine. We're going to make this right. On our terms, not his. How? Trust me, I said softly. That trust, fragile and fierce, became my catalyst. Emma believed I could fix this. I would not let her down. The next week, I became a student of Michael's patterns. I watched his social media posts with clinical detachment, noting the frequency of his bragging and the targets of his subtle digs. At family gatherings, I observed how he commanded attention, how he steered conversations toward his children's accomplishments, how he dismissed anything that didn't center him. Every Sunday dinner became a research opportunity. My son made varsity, he would announce, waiting for applause. That's wonderful, I would reply with a pleasant smile, revealing nothing. He never asked about Emma. That was fine. I didn't need him to. I needed to understand his ego, his blind spots, his assumptions. Michael believed control was permanent. He thought influence was the same as power. He assumed his position on the school board made him untouchable. Every arrogant comment, every smug post, every casual dismissal of Emma's achievements became data. I cataloged his weaknesses like evidence in a case I was building. Because that's exactly what this was. A case against a man who had spent years feeling superior without earning it. Michael was oblivious to my observation. He saw compliance and moved on. That was his first mistake. I spent evenings researching scholarships, foundations, and mentorship programs. Emma deserved opportunities that didn't depend on Michael's approval. Every door he tried to close, I would find 10 others to open. I mapped out summer programs at universities, leadership conferences, and academic competitions. I contacted Emma's teachers privately, asking for detailed recommendation letters that highlighted specific achievements. I documented everything. Her GPA, her volunteer hours, her leadership positions, her awards. I created a portfolio that told the story of who she was beyond Michael's narrative. The internet became my library. I found scholarships for first-generation college students, for young women in STEM, for community leaders, for debate champions. I found programs Michael had never heard of because they required actual research instead of just board connections. I became invisible in plain sight. At family dinners, I was pleasant and unremarkable. At home, I was building a foundation Michael couldn't touch. Emma watched me work late into the night. Papers spread across the dining table. "What are you doing?" she asked one evening. "Making sure your future doesn't depend on anyone's permission," I answered. She smiled for the first time since the ceremony. I quietly enlisted allies. Emma's debate coach, Mrs. Harrison, had noticed the honors program exclusion. "That was wrong," she told me over coffee. Emma earned that recognition. "I know," I said. I'm not asking you to fight Michael directly. I'm asking you to help Emma find opportunities outside his reach. Mrs. Harrison understood immediately. Within a week, she had connected me with 3 scholarship programs and a summer debate intensive. Emma's English teacher, Mr. Peterson, wrote a recommendation letter so powerful it made me cry. Emma represents everything education should cultivate, he wrote. Intelligence, integrity, and genuine curiosity. I reached out to family friends who worked in education, asking for guidance without mentioning Michael. They offered connections to programs, introductions to mentors, and advice on applications. Each person who knew Emma's potential became part of an invisible network. They didn't know they were part of a larger plan. They just wanted to help a deserving student. Michael never saw them coming because he wasn't looking. He assumed his control was absolute. He never considered that influence could be built quietly through genuine relationships instead of board positions. I tested Michael's ego carefully. At a family barbecue, I mentioned casually that Emma was applying for a competitive summer program. That's ambitious, he said with a patronizing smile. Those programs rarely accept local students. She has a strong application, I replied neutrally. He laughed, that smug, dismissive laugh that assumed I was naive. Competition is tough. Wouldn't want her to be disappointed. I smiled pleasantly and changed the subject. Inside, I noted his assumption. He believed Emma would fail. He believed his narrative about her being unremarkable was reality. That blind arrogance became evidence I would use later. Each conversation where he underestimated her, each time he dismissed her potential, each moment he assumed control, I catalogued. Michael was so confident in his dominance that he never considered he might be wrong. He never imagined that the quiet sister he had overshadowed for decades might be more strategic than he realized. His ego was predictable. That made it exploitable. As I drove home that evening, Emma asked, "Why did you tell Uncle Michael about the program?" "Because," I said carefully, "sometimes people reveal themselves when they think they're winning." 3 weeks later, Emma received an email. She had been selected for an interview with the Morrison Leadership Fellowship, a prestigious program for high school students showing exceptional promise. Her hands shook as she showed me the notification. "Mom, this is huge." "You earned it," I said, though my heart was pounding with pride. The interview was in 2 weeks. We practiced every evening. Emma researched the program, prepared thoughtful questions, and articulated her goals with confidence I hadn't seen since the graduation incident. The day of the interview, she wore a navy blazer and carried herself with quiet determination. I waited in the lobby while she met with the panel. When she emerged 45 minutes later, she was glowing. "I think it went really well," she said, cautiously optimistic. 2 weeks later, the acceptance email arrived. Emma had been selected as one of 25 students nationwide. The fellowship included a full scholarship to a summer leadership program, mentorship opportunities, and a credential that would strengthen every future application. Michael knew nothing about it. He continued to believe his narrative was intact, that Emma was struggling, that his exclusion had worked. That ignorance was perfect. Sunday dinners at my parents' house became theater. Michael would arrive with his wife and children, dominating conversations with stories of their achievements. "My daughter made student council secretary," he announced one evening. "That's wonderful," my mother replied warmly. Michael glanced at me, waiting for me to mention Emma. I simply smiled and sipped my water. The silence seemed to satisfy him. He believed Emma had nothing worth mentioning. Under the surface, a storm was forming. Emma was attending the Leadership Fellowship, submitting scholarship applications, and being recognized in ways Michael couldn't see. But I didn't announce them. Not yet. Let him be comfortable. Let him assume dominance. His complacency was valuable. My father asked about Emma once. "How's school?" "She's doing well," I said simply. "Working hard." Michael made a dismissive sound. "High school is just preparation. The real challenges come later. I nodded agreeably, biting back the response that Emma was already succeeding at levels his children wouldn't reach for years. Patience was strategic. Let Michael continue underestimating us. Every moment of his false confidence was another brick in the foundation I was building. The longer he remained oblivious, the more spectacular his eventual realization would be. Behind the scenes, Emma's momentum was building. She submitted applications to 3 academic competitions and was accepted to all of them. She applied for 5 scholarships and received interviews for 4. Each acceptance, each recognition, each opportunity became another crack in the facade Michael had tried to build around her. The Morrison Fellowship connected her with a mentor who worked in education policy. Dr. Williams recognized Emma's potential immediately and began introducing her to opportunities Michael had never heard of. "Your daughter has something rare," Dr. Williams told me during a parent meeting. "She's intellectually gifted, but more importantly, she's genuinely curious and kind. That combination will take her far." Emma started writing for the school newspaper, joined a community service project, and attended weekend workshops on leadership. Every activity was strategic, not just for college applications, but for building a narrative that couldn't be erased. Michael might control the school board, but he didn't control national organizations, scholarship foundations, or university programs. I documented everything meticulously. Awards, certifications, letters of recommendation, published articles. I created a record of achievement so comprehensive that no one could deny Emma's excellence, not even my brother. 6 months after the graduation incident, I made a decision. I contacted the community foundation that managed educational scholarships in our county and proposed establishing a new award. The Whitman Family Academic Scholarship would recognize students who demonstrated exceptional academic achievement, leadership, and community service. Students Michael had tried to make invisible. I funded it with money I had been saving for years, money I had earned through long hours and careful planning. The scholarship was legitimate, registered properly, and indisputable. The foundation was thrilled. "This is a generous contribution," the director told me. "What inspired it?" "My daughter," I said honestly, "and every student who works hard but doesn't always receive recognition they deserve." The scholarship would award $5,000 annually to one graduating senior. The selection committee would include teachers and community leaders, not school board members. Michael would have no influence over it. When the foundation announced the new scholarship at their annual meeting, my parents were surprised and proud. Michael attended the meeting as a board member. I watched his face when they announced the Whitman name would be attached to an academic award. His jaw tightened. For the first time, the family legacy carried my contribution, not his ego. I had created something permanent. Michael tried to maintain his superiority. At the next family dinner, he brought up his son's acceptance to a local college with excessive pride. "We're very proud," he said, looking around the table for affirmation. "State University is a great school," my mother agreed. "And Emma?" Michael asked, his tone suggesting he expected bad news. "She's still deciding between programs," I said calmly. It was true. Emma had been accepted to 4 competitive summer programs and was choosing which to attend. But I didn't elaborate. Michael smiled, interpreting my vague response as failure. "Well, there's always community college." I met his eyes evenly. There are many good paths. His condescension was perfect. He believed he was winning, that his attempts to diminish Emma had succeeded, that she was struggling. I let him believe it. Each moment of his smug satisfaction was another opportunity for him to dig himself deeper. My mother changed the subject, asking about my work. I answered briefly, redirecting attention away from myself and Emma. Invisibility was strategic. Let Michael command the spotlight. Let him perform his superiority. Meanwhile, Emma was building a future he couldn't touch. His underestimation was the best advantage I could have asked for. Emma's achievements began appearing in places Michael couldn't ignore. The local newspaper published an article about Morrison Fellowship recipients, featuring Emma's photograph and quote about educational equity. The school newsletter highlighted her debate team leadership. A community organization recognized her volunteer work with an award presented at their annual banquet. Each recognition was small enough that Michael couldn't claim it was orchestrated against him, but visible enough that family and community members noticed. At church, neighbors congratulated Emma. At the grocery store, teachers stopped to tell me how proud they were. Slowly, the narrative was shifting. Michael's smile faltered at Sunday dinner when my mother mentioned seeing Emma's picture in the paper. "That's nice," he said tightly. "Local papers publish everything." But his eyes showed uncertainty for the first time. He was losing control of the story he had tried to write about Emma being unremarkable. I watched him attempt to regain dominance by mentioning his daughter's participation in a school play. But my mother had already moved on to asking Emma about the fellowship. Emma answered confidently, describing the program and her project on educational access. Michael's children sat quietly uninterested. The contrast was subtle but unmistakable. An unexpected ally emerged. My cousin Nina, Michael's peer in age, approached me after a family gathering. "I saw Emma's article," she said quietly. "She's impressive." "Thank you." "Michael wasn't happy about it," Nina added, glancing over her shoulder. "He said something about local recognition not meaning much." I nodded, unsurprised. Nina hesitated, then said, "I just want you to know, some of us see what's happening. Emma deserves better than how he treated her." It was a small moment of validation, but it mattered. Michael's control over family opinion was weakening. People were noticing Emma's achievements despite his attempts to minimize them. At the next family event, Nina made a point of asking Emma about her plans, engaging her in conversation, showing interest. Michael stiffened, trying to redirect attention. But Nina, usually deferential to him, didn't yield. Other family members joined the conversation. Michael's children played on their phones, ignored. For years, Michael had commanded family attention through force of personality and assumed authority. Now, genuine interest in Emma's authentic achievements was naturally drawing people away from his performance. He was losing the subtle power games he thought he controlled. And he knew it. Michael tried to interfere. I discovered this through Mrs. Harrison, Emma's debate coach. "Someone contacted the Morrison Fellowship," she told me privately. "They asked questions about Emma's qualifications, suggesting her application might have included exaggerations." My blood ran cold. What did the fellowship say? They investigated thoroughly and found everything Emma submitted was accurate and supported by evidence. They told the caller they don't appreciate attempts to discredit their fellows. Did they say who called? Mrs. Harrison hesitated. They didn't identify him, but the caller mentioned being a school board member concerned about integrity. Michael. He had tried to sabotage Emma's fellowship. When that failed, he contacted 2 scholarship programs Emma had applied to, raising similar concerns. Both programs reviewed her applications carefully. Both concluded her credentials were legitimate and impressive. Both noted the complaints seemed motivated by personal animosity rather than factual concerns. Michael's interference backfired spectacularly. Instead of discrediting Emma, he made himself look petty, desperate, and small. The fellowship director even called to apologize to Emma for the distraction. "Your work speaks for itself," he assured her. Michael had overplayed his hand, revealing his fear that Emma's success threatened him. The first major turning point came during a family celebration for my parents' anniversary. 75 relatives gathered at a restaurant. Michael arranged to give a toast, positioning himself as the successful son honoring his parents. He spoke for 10 minutes about family legacy, success, and values. Then, without prompting, he made a mistake. "Some family members understand the importance of real achievement," he said, his eyes flicking toward me. "Not just participation trophies and local recognition, but genuine accomplishment." The room grew quiet. Michael smiled, believing he had made his point. Then my mother stood. "If we're discussing achievement," she said carefully, "I'd like Emma to share what she's been working on." Michael's face paled. Emma, surprised but composed, stood. She didn't brag. She simply described the Morrison Fellowship, the research project she was conducting on educational access, and the scholarship she had received to attend a summer program at Stanford. She spoke clearly and confidently, not to impress, but to inform. The room listened intently. When she finished, the applause was genuine and enthusiastic. Family members asked questions, engaged with her ideas, congratulated her sincerely. Michael sat rigidly, his toast forgotten. The room's attention had turned toward Emma, away from him. My smile was quiet but deeply satisfied. Emma's achievements gained momentum that became impossible to ignore. She won a regional essay contest. She was interviewed for a podcast about youth leadership. She presented her research at a conference where educators and policymakers took notes. Invitations to speak at community events arrived regularly. Scholarship offers from organizations Michael had never heard of filled our mailbox. Programs wanting talented students reached out directly. Every opportunity led to another. The network effect of genuine achievement was powerful. Each recognition validated the next. Each accomplishment opened doors Michael couldn't close. His attempts to control the narrative failed spectacularly because he was fighting against reality. Emma wasn't succeeding because of connections or manipulation. She was succeeding because she was talented, hardworking, and authentic. People recognized that. Organizations invested in her. Mentors believed in her potential. Michael tried to dismiss these achievements at family gatherings. "Anyone can win small awards," he said dismissively, but his voice lacked conviction. The achievements weren't small and everyone knew it. My father, who had always supported Michael's ego, began asking Emma detailed questions about her work. Michael would interrupt, trying to redirect conversation. My father, usually compliant, began to look annoyed. Michael's frustration became visible. At a family dinner, he tried intimidation. "These programs don't guarantee anything," he told Emma directly. "Real success requires connections." "Emma has connections," I said calmly. "Mentors, teachers, and organizations that recognize her potential." "School board connections matter more," Michael insisted. "Not for university admissions," I replied. "Not for national scholarships. Not for the opportunities she's receiving." His jaw tightened. I could make things difficult. The room went silent. Everyone heard the threat. "Could you?" I asked, meeting his eyes. "Because it seems like every time you try to interfere, Emma succeeds anyway." Michael stood abruptly. "You don't understand how things work." "I understand perfectly," I said. "Emma's success doesn't require your approval." He left early, his wife following with an apologetic glance. My father, for the first time I could remember, didn't defend him. "That was unnecessary," he said to the empty chair. I said nothing. Let his actions speak for themselves. Michael was losing control, and his desperation was making him visible to everyone who had once excused his behavior. His mask was cracking. Support for Emma emerged from unexpected places. Teachers who had quietly documented Michael's interference began forwarding opportunities directly to me. They included notes like, "Thought Emma might be interested," and "This program values genuine achievement." Scholarship committees that had received Michael's complaints sent encouraging emails. "We're impressed by Emma's resilience and integrity," one director wrote. "Please don't let anyone discourage her from applying." Mentors from the Morrison Fellowship connected Emma with additional programs, creating a support system Michael couldn't infiltrate. Dr. Williams introduced her to university professors who offered research opportunities. Mrs. Harrison recommended her for national debate competitions. Every person who recognized Emma's potential became an advocate, not because I asked, but because she earned their respect. The network I had carefully built was now sustaining itself. Opportunities multiplied organically. Emma's reputation preceded her. Organizations wanted her involvement because she added value, not because of family connections. This was power Michael couldn't understand or replicate. His influence was transactional and positional. Emma's was earned and authentic. One couldn't be bought. The other couldn't be taken away. Michael had spent years controlling local opportunities. He never considered that real success existed beyond his small sphere of influence. The public exposure came at the county's Education Foundation annual gala. Emma was invited as a Morrison Fellow to speak about educational equity. The audience included teachers, administrators, business leaders, and yes, school board members. Michael attended in his official capacity, seated prominently. Emma's speech was thoughtful and personal. She talked about students who work hard but don't always receive recognition, about systemic barriers and the importance of mentorship, about how one person's belief can change a trajectory. She didn't mention the honors program exclusion. She didn't mention Michael. She didn't need to. Everyone who knew the context understood exactly what she was describing. The standing ovation lasted several minutes. Afterward, people approached Emma with genuine admiration. University representatives handed her their cards. Scholarship directors introduced themselves. Michael stood near the back, looking small and petty and irrelevant. My father, who attended with my mother, hugged Emma with tears in his eyes. "I'm so proud of you," he whispered loud enough for me to hear. Michael left before the reception ended. His absence was noted. His presence had become irrelevant. The community's attention had shifted toward authentic achievement and away from political posturing. For the first time, the family understood the true power dynamic. The full revelation happened at Christmas. Our extended family gathered at my parents' house. Michael arrived late, quieter than usual. Emma was helping in the kitchen when relatives began asking about her college plans. She mentioned several universities where she had been accepted, including 2 Ivy League schools offering significant scholarships. The room went silent. "Ivy League," my uncle repeated. "Emma received early acceptances from 4 universities," I said calmly. "She's deciding between programs." My mother looked shocked. "Why didn't you tell us?" "We wanted to wait for final scholarship decisions," Emma said. My father turned to Michael. "Did you know about this?" Michael's face was tight. "I heard rumors." "Rumors," my father repeated slowly. Nina, my cousin, spoke up. "Emma's been achieving incredible things all year. Some of us have been paying attention." The implication was clear. Michael had been so busy trying to diminish Emma that he missed her actual success. His attempts at control had blinded him to reality. For years, Michael had dominated family gatherings with his children's modest achievements. Now, faced with Emma's undeniable success, he had nothing to say. The family finally understood. Emma's brilliance and my strategic planning had created something unstoppable. Something Michael couldn't erase, minimize, or control. His arrogance had blinded him completely. Michael's final attempt at manipulation came in January. He contacted the Whitman Family Scholarship Committee, suggesting Emma should be ineligible since I had funded it. The committee chairwoman called me directly. "This is inappropriate," she said firmly. The scholarship criteria were established clearly. Board members don't have authority over selection. "I appreciate your integrity," I said. "Your daughter isn't receiving special treatment," she continued. "She's simply qualified. If anything, we're scrutinizing her application more carefully to ensure fairness." Emma's application was reviewed by the full committee. They unanimously selected her as one of 3 finalists, based solely on merit. When the scholarship was awarded at a public ceremony, Michael wasn't present. He had resigned from the foundation board, citing professional obligations. Everyone knew the real reason. He couldn't face the consequences of his own behavior. His control was gone. His ego was shattered. His attempts to diminish Emma had exposed his own insecurity to everyone who once respected him. Family members who had defended him began distancing themselves. His reputation, built on false superiority, crumbled when confronted with genuine achievement. The consequences of his arrogance were fully visible, permanent, and undeniable. The Whitman Family Academic Scholarship became a celebrated part of our community. In its first year, it supported 3 deserving students, including Emma. The local paper featured an article about the scholarship's impact, quoting teachers and recipients about how recognition changed their trajectories. Organizations reached out, wanting to contribute to the fund. The foundation director told me the scholarship had inspired 2 other families to create similar awards. "You've started something important," she said. Emma's name became associated with educational access and opportunity. When people mention the Whitman family now, they thought of the scholarship of Emma's achievements, of genuine contribution. Not Michael's board position, not his political connections. Legacy had been reclaimed. At graduation, Emma walked across the stage to receive not just her diploma, but multiple awards and recognitions. The honors program, certificate, the valedictorian medal, scholarship announcements. Her name was called so many times that people laughed with delight. I watched from the audience, tears streaming down my face. My parents sat beside me, beaming with pride. Michael wasn't there. His absence was his choice, and it told everyone what they needed to know about him. 2 weeks before Emma left for university, we sat on the back porch watching fireflies. The evening was warm and peaceful. "Mom," Emma said quietly, "thank you." "For what?" "For not giving up when Uncle Michael tried to make me invisible." I took her hand. "You were never invisible, sweetheart. He just couldn't see you clearly." "Why do you think he did it?" I considered the question carefully. Because your success reminded him of his own limitations. Some people build themselves up. Others try to tear people down. He chose the wrong path. Do you think he regrets it? I don't know, I said honestly, but it doesn't matter anymore. His regret or lack of it doesn't define your worth. Emma squeezed my hand. I almost let him make me believe I wasn't good enough. But you didn't, I reminded her. You kept working, kept believing, kept pushing forward. That's who you are. The fireflies danced in the darkening yard. You are unstoppable, I told her softly. Never let anyone define your worth. Not family, not institutions, not anyone. You define yourself through your actions, your integrity, and your impact. Emma smiled, confident and calm. The girl who cried in the parking lot a year ago had transformed into a young woman who understood her own power. The family legacy had been reclaimed. Justice wasn't revenge. It was simply truth made visible. Our triumph was absolute, intelligent, and undeniable.